Imagine this. You're walking through the bustling north end of Boston on a strangely warm January afternoon. You hear a sound, a low metallic groan, quickly followed by a terrifying, deafening roar, like a freight train coming off its tracks. Then everything goes dark. You aren't swallowed by water or crushed by a building. You are suffocated and swept away by a 25-foot tidal wave of warm, sticky, industrial-grade molasses. This sounds like a dark, surreal scene from a fantasy novel, but it is one of the strangest, most tragic, and most forgotten chapters in American history. On January 15, 1919, Boston's North End was destroyed not by fire or earthquake, but by 2.3 million gallons of molasses, moving at an estimated 35 miles per hour. The Tank of Trouble. The disaster began with a massive steel storage tank located at 529 Commercial Street, near the busy Copp's Hill Wharf. It was owned by the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of the United States Industrial Alcohol, USIA, Corporation. They used the molasses, a key ingredient in making industrial alcohol, and, crucially during World War I, ammunition components, as a lucrative wartime resource. The tank itself was a monument to corporate negligence. It was rushed into construction in 1915 to meet the soaring wartime demand. It stood over 50 feet tall and 90 feet in diameter, capable of holding 2.5 million gallons. The builders, however, skipped every imaginable safety measure. The tank's steel walls were dangerously thin, and when engineers later checked the blueprint calculations, they found fundamental errors. Locals complained for years. They saw dark, sticky syrup seeping from the tank's seams, warning signs that the massive structure was struggling to contain its 12,000 tons of contents. Purity Distilling's solution? They simply painted the tank brown to hide the leaks. The USIA, prioritizing profit and speed over public safety, ignored every red flag. The perfect storm of viscosity. The day of the disaster provided the perfect, fatal confluence of physics and weather. Fresh load. A large new shipment of warm molasses had recently been pumped into the tank, likely destabilizing the older, colder molasses already inside. Thermal expansion. The days leading up to January 15th had been frigid. On the day of the disaster, the temperature spiked rapidly from below freezing to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This sudden rise caused the molasses inside the poorly constructed tank to warm, expand, and ferment, generating internal gases that pushed the weak walls to their breaking point. The rupture. At roughly 12:30 p.m., the massive tank burst. Witnesses described a sound like machine gun fire as the rivets holding the structure together violently shot into the air. The resulting wave was a force of nature. It was not just thick and sticky. Molasses is about 40% denser than water. This massive, heavy surge of syrup slammed into the city with the force of a battering ram. The immediate devastation. The wave, which reached heights of 15 to 40 feet, depending on the location, instantly leveled buildings, including the nearby firehouse, Engine 31, which was knocked clean off its foundation. The force was so immense that it drove steel panels from the collapsed tank against the girders of the elevated train tracks, causing a passing elevated train to tip off its rails, narrowly avoiding a catastrophic plunge. The human tragedy was immediate and gruesome. People and animals were instantly suffocated and trapped in the sticky tide. 21 people were killed, and over 150 were severely injured. Rescuers faced an impossible task. The molasses, quickly cooled by the winter air and the streets, solidified into a viscous, waist-deep sludge. The rescue effort involved hundreds of sailors, police, and Red Cross workers who had to wade, dig, and often carve their way through the deepening, heavy syrup. The cleanup took weeks, requiring city workers to pump seawater into the streets to wash the molasses into the harbor. For decades afterward, Boston residents claimed they could still smell the sweet, earthy scent of molasses lingering on hot summer days. The American legacy. The Great Molasses Flood, initially overshadowed by the end of World War I and the subsequent Spanish flu epidemic, became a landmark case in American law. The subsequent class action lawsuit filed against the USIA was one of the first major examples of corporate liability in the U.S. Crucially, the disaster directly led to the establishment of stricter building codes and safety standards nationwide. It forced architects and engineers across America to professionally certify their plans and ensured that independent oversight would be mandated for major construction projects. The sticky apocalypse was not just a strange footnote, it was a bizarre tragedy that fundamentally changed the way America built its cities, proving that even the sweetest of substances, when mishandled by negligence, can deliver death and ultimately a bitter lesson in accountability.